Silence is the first thing archaeologists notice when they arrive at the ruins. Not the peaceful silence of nature reclaiming stone, but a heavier quiet, as if something vital stepped away and never returned. Streets stretch forward and without footprints. Homes sit open without occupants, and workshops remain exactly where hands last set their tools down. This was not a city destroyed. It was a city paused. Civilizations usually announce their deaths loudly. There are walls shattered by siege engines, layers of ash from fire, weapons scattered where people fought and fell. Here, none of that exists. No broken defenses, no hurried burials, no final messages carved in desperation. What remains is order without life, structure without purpose, and questions without answers. Pottery rests unbroken on floors. Storage rooms still hold traces of grain. Children's toys appear where laughter should have echoed. These details create an unsettling impression that everyone expected to return. Historians admit this is the part that troubles them most. People fleeing danger rarely leave their livelihoods behind so completely unless they believe the absence will be temporary. The deeper researchers dig, the more disturbing the pattern becomes. Entire districts were abandoned at once, not gradually, not unevenly, but as if an invisible signal told everyone the same thing at the same moment. There is no evidence of panic, yet no evidence of survival either. This is the paradox at the heart of the mystery. A society advanced enough to build, trade, and thrive did not collapse under attack, starvation, or rebellion. It simply vanished. And standing in these empty streets, one question lingers, heavy and unresolved. What force is powerful enough to erase a civilization without leaving a single scream behind? The silence endures, yet daring historians to explain what history itself seems unwilling to remember fully today. When historians study the collapse of a civilization, they look for familiar signatures. War leaves scars that are hard to hide, arrowheads embedded in walls, skeletons bearing violent wounds, cities burned and rebuilt in haste. Conquest almost always produces records because victors like to be remembered. Even slow decline leaves evidence in the form of shrinking settlements, poorer craftsmanship, and desperate adaptations. History, in that sense, is usually loud, but here the expected signs are absent. There are no mass graves filled with the dead of a final stand. No layers of ash suggesting cities burned in rage or fear. No weapons discarded in chaos. No hastily fortified gates. No defensive structures thrown together in desperation. The walls stand as they were built, unbroken and untested, as if no enemy ever approached them. Even more unsettling is the silence in the historical record. There are no accounts from rivals boasting of victory, no neighboring powers claiming new territory, no inscriptions celebrating conquest or domination. It is as if no one else noticed this civilization disappear, or if they did, chose not to speak of it. Experts find this absence harder to explain than destruction. Wars create evidence even when records are lost. Violence leaves traces in soil and bone. Yet excavation after excavation returns the same result. Nothing that explains an end. The civilization did not lose a war, did not fall to an invader, did not burn itself to the ground. Instead, it slipped out of history's grasp quietly, and that is what disturbs scholars the most. When the usual explanations fail, the mind searches for alternatives, some uncomfortable, some unsettling. Because if history expects noise and finds only silence, then something fundamentally different must have happened here. The first real clue appears not in monuments, but in ordinary moments. Archaeologists begin to notice patterns that feel wrong in a subtle, unsettling way. This civilization did not slowly fade or weaken over generations. It stopped. The evidence points to an ending so abrupt that daily routines were never completed. Cooking vessels remain positioned beside hearths, unfinished. Tools lie where they were last used, not stored or discarded. Construction projects were halted mid progress, walls left half raised, plans never revised. These are not the signs of a society preparing for decline. They are the signs of interruption. In most collapses, change is visible. Art becomes simpler, buildings grow smaller, resources are stretched thin. Here, there is no such transition. Quality remains high until the very end, as if prosperity and stability existed right up to the moment everything ceased. This suddenness forces researchers to abandon comfortable theories. What makes the situation truly chilling is the implication behind these details. People did not pack belongings. They did not dismantle homes or carry valuables away. They left as though departure was temporary, as though return was expected. That assumption, frozen into the archaeological record, raises a question no one can answer. If they believed they would come back, what stopped them? Something powerful enough to interrupt an entire civilization at once, yet subtle enough to leave no trail of violence. The first clue is not destruction, but timing, and it suggests that whatever happened allowed no second chances, only silence where life once moved. Historians now face an uncomfortable reality because the evidence refuses to behave like collapse and instead whispers of a decision, an event, or a warning so absolute that continuation itself became impossible for everyone involved. This moment marks the true beginning of a mystery history cannot close fully. At the moment when this civilization disappears from the historical record, everything suggests it should have been entering a long future, not an ending. Archaeological evidence paints a picture of abundance rather than struggle. Trade routes were active, stretching across regions and connecting distant communities. Materials sourced from faraway lands appear in homes and workshops, proof that commerce was not only alive, but expanding. Population indicators point upward, not down. Settlements were growing, not shrinking. New neighborhoods were being added instead of abandoned, and food storage systems show no signs of emergency rationing. There are no skeletal markers of malnutrition, no sudden dietary changes that usually accompany hardship. Even agricultural patterns suggest careful planning, not desperation. This is what makes the disappearance so unsettling. Civilizations on the brink of collapse leave fingerprints of stress everywhere. Crops fail, coinage is debased, craftsmanship declines. Here, none of that happens. Tools remain precise, art remains confident, organization remains complex right until the end. Historians are forced to confront a deeply uncomfortable truth. This society did not vanish because it was weak. It vanished while functioning, thriving, and expanding. The systems that sustained daily life were working exactly as intended. The economy had not stalled. Leadership structures had not visibly fractured. In the normal rhythm of history, prosperity buys time. It allows societies to adapt, reform, or recover. Yet in this case, prosperity seems irrelevant. The civilization disappears not after years of visible decline, but at a moment when survival appeared almost guaranteed. And that contradiction lingers because it suggests the cause was not internal decay, but something external, sudden, or deeply misunderstood. Walking through the ruins, researchers are struck by how deliberate everything feels. Streets follow planned grids. Residential areas are separated from industrial spaces. Water management systems channel rain and waste with efficiency that would challenge much later societies. This was not accidental growth, it was design. Drainage systems run beneath homes, carefully maintained and standardized across cities. Public spaces are organized for movement and sanitation. Construction materials are chosen for durability, not convenience. These cities were built with the assumption that generations would live here, repair them, and improve them over time. Nothing about the infrastructure suggests fragility. On the contrary, it reflects confidence confidence that resources would continue, confidence that governance would remain stable, confidence that tomorrow would resemble today. That long term mindset is what makes the abandonment so disturbing. Civilizations that sense instability rush construction or neglect maintenance. Here, maintenance continues until the end. Systems remain clean. Streets remain orderly. Even minor structures show care and planning. This was a society investing in its future, which raises the central contradiction. Why would a civilization engineered to endure choose to walk away from everything it built? Cities like these are not abandoned lightly. They represent labor, knowledge, and identity. Leaving them behind suggests a force strong enough to override logic, attachment, and tradition all at once. The engineering tells us something critical. This was not a temporary settlement, it was meant to last. And that makes the silence that follows feel less like collapse and more like interruption, as though something arrived that long term planning simply could not account for. Perhaps the most haunting evidence lies not in stone, but in absence of ink. Administrative seals, written symbols, accounting marks, and record keeping artifacts follow a clear pattern for years, then abruptly stop. Not tapering, not changing, just stopping. There is no phase of disorder in the records, no sudden increase in emergency markings, no shift in language suggesting fear or confusion. The system remains consistent until it vanishes completely. It is as if someone closed a book mid-sentence. In most historical collapses, bureaucracy becomes louder before it disappears. Leaders issue decrees. Officials scramble to maintain control. Here, there is no such noise. The silence is clean, almost deliberate, and that deeply unsettles scholars. Written history usually survives chaos because people try to document it. But in this case, there is no panic preserved in clay, stone, or seal. The administrative voice of the civilization goes quiet all at once. This raises a chilling possibility. Either the end came too fast for records to reflect it, or the people who understood how to write, record, and organize simply left with everyone else. When the paperwork stops without explanation, historians are left staring at a void. The records do not tell us how the civilization ended. They only tell us when it stopped speaking. And that moment, sharp and silent, suggests not decay, but departure. When archaeologists excavate a destroyed city, they usually encounter layers of violence almost immediately. Burned timbers, collapsed, roofs, scorched earth, and human remains caught where people fell. Destruction leaves a signature, and time rarely erases it completely. Yet in this case, excavation trenches reveal something profoundly unsettling instead. The layers are calm, ordered, undisturbed. There is no ash horizon marking fire, no rubble suggesting buildings were pulled down by force, no bodies piled in streets or pressed against walls in desperate defense. The soil tells a story of continuity, not catastrophe. It suggests that whatever happened did not arrive with flames or blades. This absence baffles experts. Even sudden natural disasters tend to leave traces of chaos, but here there is none. Homes are intact, streets remain passable, public buildings stand as they were constructed. If death came, it did not come violently, and if danger arrived, it left no physical struggle behind. Archaeologists are trained to read disorder, yet this site refuses to provide it. The calmness of the remains contradicts every expectation of collapse. There is no sign of hurried barricades or last-minute defenses, no weapons clutched in final moments, nothing that resembles fear frozen in place. Instead, the ground offers silence, a silence so complete that it forces researchers to reconsider the event itself. If disaster struck, it did so without sound, without fire, without resistance. And that realization unsettles even seasoned scholars, because history rarely ends quietly. When the earth yields no screams, no smoke, and no graves, it suggests an ending that followed rules we do not yet understand, leaving calm where chaos should have been waiting instead. As excavations continue, another pattern emerges, one that deepens the mystery rather than clarifying it. Valuable objects remain exactly where they were last used. Tools are neatly arranged, ornaments lie undisturbed. Storage containers still hold traces of food, sealed and protected as if meant for future use. This is not the aftermath of looting. Invaders take valuables, survivors take necessities. Fleeing populations prioritize what they can carry. Yet here, people left behind not only heavy goods, but items of personal and economic importance. The choice appears deliberate. Archaeologists struggle with this implication. It suggests that those who left did not believe they were abandoning their world permanently. Leaving food behind only makes sense if return is expected. Leaving tools implies work was meant to resume. Even domestic objects speak of intention rather than loss. There is no evidence of stripping buildings for materials, no sign of people salvaging what they could before escape. Instead, there is order, almost care. It feels as though departure followed a plan, or at least a shared understanding. This challenges every familiar scenario. People do not walk away from security unless compelled by something stronger than hunger or fear of theft. The untouched objects suggest trust, perhaps even confidence that absence would be brief. But history offers no record of their return. These items waited undisturbed for centuries. Their presence turns the mystery inward, away from destruction and toward decision. Whatever caused this departure convinced an entire population that leaving everything behind was the correct choice, at least for a while. And that belief, frozen in abandoned rooms, makes the silence feel intentional rather than accidental. Time itself becomes a clue when researchers examine the layers beneath their feet. Stratigraphic evidence reveals something deeply unsettling. The abandonment did not unfold over centuries or even generations. It appears compressed into a remarkably short window. There are no overlapping phases of occupation and decline, no gradual thinning of population. Instead, habitation stops almost simultaneously across vast areas. Entire cities seem to empty at once, or within a span so brief that it challenges assumptions about how societies move. Historians know how slow migration usually is. Families relocate in waves, communities fragment. Yet here the pattern suggests coordination, not drift. Streets are abandoned together, districts fall silent together. The timing aligns too closely to be coincidence. Some estimates suggest the transition occurred within a single generation. possibly even less. That speed raises uncomfortable questions. How do thousands, perhaps millions, of people relocate so quickly without leaving trails of conflict, starvation, or chaos behind? The answer remains elusive. There is no evidence of forced removal, yet the scale implies collective action. Whatever prompted this movement spread faster than rumor and stronger than resistance. This was not a slow fading into obscurity. It was a decisive moment, one that history barely recorded. The unsettling speed of abandonment suggests urgency, but without visible panic. And that contradiction points toward a catalyst we have not yet named. One powerful, enough to empty cities quietly, swiftly, and almost completely, leaving behind a world paused between presence and oblivion. When confronted with a mystery, this unsettling, historians often reach first for explanations that feel familiar and grounded. Climate change has become the most comfortable answer. Shifting rivers, altered rainfall patterns, prolonged droughts, or creeping desertification offer a framework that feels scientific, measurable, and non-conspiratorial. Nature, after all, has ended civilizations before. Geological evidence does suggest environmental change during the period in question. River courses may have shifted, slowly abandoning once fertile plains. Rainfall patterns appear to have become less predictable. Agricultural systems that depended on seasonal stability could have faced mounting pressure. On the surface, this explanation seems reasonable, even inevitable, but as researchers dig deeper, cracks begin to appear. The timelines do not align cleanly. Environmental changes unfold gradually, often over centuries, yet the abandonment appears abrupt. If rivers shifted, they did so too slowly to explain a sudden departure. If drought occurred, it left surprisingly few signs of prolonged stress in human remains or settlement patterns. Even more troubling is the lack of preparatory behavior. Societies facing environmental pressure usually respond visibly. They change crops, adjust infrastructure, relocate settlements closer to water, or build new systems to adapt. In this case, those responses are strangely absent. Climate change may have been part of the story, but it feels incomplete. It explains pressure, not decision. It describes conditions, not urgency. And while nature can push civilizations to the brink, it rarely does so without leaving a trail of struggle behind. Here, that struggle is missing, leaving the safe explanation feeling too simple for a disappearance this precise. History offers countless examples of civilizations enduring environmental hardship. Prolonged droughts, volcanic winters, floods, and shifting climates have tested societies repeatedly, yet many adapted and survived. They moved populations gradually, altered economic systems, and restructured power. Adaptation leaves evidence, and archaeologists know how to recognize it. What is striking here is the absence of adaptation. There are no signs of experimental agriculture or emergency construction. No shift in settlement locations suggesting a slow retreat from failing land. No transitional architecture that marks improvisation or desperation. Everything continues as normal until it stops entirely. If nature were the sole cause, panic would likely appear unevenly. Some communities would fail before others, resources would become centralized, conflict might erupt over water or land. Yet none of these patterns merge. The abandonment feels coordinated rather than chaotic. This lack of response raises difficult questions. Either the civilization had no time to adapt, or adaptation was deemed pointless. Both possibilities imply something more sudden than drought or slow climate drift. Natural stress usually produces visible warning signs, allowing societies to respond. Here, warning seems absent or ignored. That suggests the trigger was not merely worsening conditions, but a realization, a moment when circumstances crossed an invisible line. Nature alone does not explain why people would leave functioning cities without first trying to save them. The missing chapter is human reaction, and that silence hints that the threat may not have been gradual but immediate, something that rendered long-term solutions irrelevant in an instant. If environmental factors played any role at all, evidence suggests they were accelerated by something sudden, a tipping point, a moment when conditions changed too quickly for adaptation or record keeping. This shifts the narrative away from slow decline and toward abrupt disruption. Some researchers speculate about catastrophic floods, seismic events, or rapid hydrological changes that unfolded within years, not centuries. Others consider the possibility of compounded stresses reaching a breaking point simultaneously across regions. Alone, each factor might be survivable. Together, they could force immediate action. What matters most is speed. The archaeological record shows no long struggle, only a clean break. That implies decisions were made quickly, perhaps under pressure no one had experienced before. If there was fear, it did not manifest as chaos. It manifested as movement. This possibility reframes the mystery. Instead of asking why the civilization declined, historians must ask what suddenly made staying impossible. Whatever it was, it erased normal patterns of response and replaced them with silence. If climate change contributed, it did so not as a slow killer, but as a catalyst. Something pushed the system past a point of no return, and whatever happened next unfolded faster than history could document, leaving behind only empty cities and unanswered questions. When physical destruction offers no answers, attention turns to what cannot be easily seen. Disease has ended civilizations before, often swiftly and mercilessly. A fast-moving pandemic could explain empty streets, halted routines, and the sudden disappearance of entire populations. On paper, it seems plausible. Invisible killers do not burn cities or shatter walls. They move silently, leaving fear in their wake. Yet the archaeological record resists this explanation. Pandemics leave patterns. Mass graves appear when burial rituals are overwhelmed. Emergency cemeteries form on city edges. Bodies show signs of stress, malnutrition, or hurried disposal. Here, such evidence is missing. There are no large burial sites marking a catastrophic loss of life. Even cultural responses are absent. In times of plague, societies change behavior dramatically. Religious practices intensify. Protective symbols appear. Medical or ritual interventions leave traces. None of this is present. There is no spike in ritual objects, no shift in iconography suggesting fear of contagion, no sudden architectural changes to isolate the sick. If disease struck, it did so without provoking visible panic. That alone is troubling. Fear usually spreads faster than illness, yet here fear seems curiously muted or undocumented. The people did not barricade themselves inside homes. They did not alter city layouts. They did not leave behind signs of desperation. This absence forces historians to ask a darker question. Was the population wiped out, or did they leave before that could happen? A pandemic might explain urgency, but it fails to explain coordination. Entire cities do not empty themselves in silence while disease rages. The theory offers possibility, but not resolution, leaving too many gaps where answers should be. Another explanation shifts focus from biology to environment. Perhaps the land itself became hostile. Toxic contamination, heavy metals, or poisoned water sources could make cities unlivable without killing everyone outright. Such threats are subtle. They do not announce themselves with fire or noise. They seep into daily life until survival becomes uncertain. Geological studies sometimes reveal elevated levels of harmful substances in ancient soils or water systems. Flooding can spread toxins. Mining activities can contaminate landscapes. Even natural processes can introduce dangerous elements into once safe environments. If water turned poisonous, leaving might have been the only option. This theory aligns more closely with evacuation than extinction. It suggests people fled not because they were dying, but because staying meant slow death. Such a realization could prompt swift collective departure. But again, questions emerge. If toxicity was localized, why abandon entire regions? If contamination was gradual, why is there no evidence of mitigation or adaptation? Societies often respond to environmental hazards by relocating water sources or modifying infrastructure. Here, those attempts are absent. Moreover, contamination severe enough to force abandonment would likely leave biological markers in human remains. Yet skeletal evidence does not strongly support widespread poisoning or chronic exposure. The landscape does not scream danger, it whispers uncertainty. The idea of a toxic environment introduces a haunting possibility, a threat that did not kill immediately but made the future untenable. Still, it does not fully explain the precision of the abandonment or the silence that followed. No matter which explanation historians favor, one question refuses to fade. Even if disease spread, even if land turned hostile, why abandon everything forever? Temples are not left behind lightly. Homes, symbols, and sacred spaces anchor identity. People endure extraordinary hardship to protect them. Yet here, departure appears final. There is no evidence of return, no rebuilding, no attempt to reclaim what was lost. That permanence challenges every proposed theory. If danger passed, why not come back? If the threat remained, why is there no record of warning future generations? The silence suggests either total loss of knowledge or a deliberate severing from the past. This is the problem no theory can solve. Disaster explains urgency. Environment explains pressure. Disease explains fear. None explain erasure. None explain why a civilization would choose disappearance over survival of memory. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what drove them away, but what kept them from returning. Until that question is answered, every explanation remains incomplete, hovering between possibility and doubt, unable to close, the story history left unfinished. When material explanations begin to falter, some researchers turn inward toward the unseen foundations that hold civilizations together. Beyond walls and roads, societies are bound by shared beliefs, myths, and assumptions about the world. If those collapse, everything else can follow. One theory suggests that this civilization did not fall to an external force, but to a crisis of meaning so deep that it unraveled collective identity. Religious systems often provide continuity, explaining suffering and promising renewal. If those explanations fail, doubt spreads quietly. Archaeologists note subtle shifts in symbolic artifacts. Near the end of occupation, certain motifs disappear. Ritual spaces fall out of use. It is not dramatic destruction, but quiet neglect, as if belief itself began to drain away. Ideological collapse does not leave rubble, it leaves emptiness. When people stop believing their world makes sense, they may abandon it rather than fight for it. This could explain the calm nature of departure. No panic, no violence, only withdrawal. What makes this theory compelling is its silence. People losing faith do not always announce it. They comply outwardly, maintain routines, and then, when the moment arrives, leave without resistance. If the social glue dissolved, departure might have felt inevitable rather than tragic. Still, this raises troubling questions. Belief systems evolve, but rarely vanish overnight. For an entire civilization to lose faith simultaneously implies a shock, a revelation, or a failure so profound that it shattered trust in everything familiar. The theory hints that the end may not have been physical at all, but psychological. A collective decision that life as it was no longer held meaning worth preserving. Another possibility places responsibility not on the masses, but on those who ruled them. Power in ancient societies was often concentrated, and decisions made at the top could reshape entire populations. Some scholars suggest that elites may have ordered relocation for reasons never recorded or intentionally erased. Such decisions might be strategic rather than desperate. Leaders may have perceived threats invisible to ordinary people, whether environmental, political, or ideological. They could have chosen secrecy to avoid panic, framing departure as necessary rather than catastrophic. The archaeological record supports this unsettling idea. Coordination appears too precise to be spontaneous. Entire cities emptied in patterns, suggesting organized movement. Roads show where consistent with departure, not flight. This implies planning, not chaos. If elites controlled information, they could have guided populations away without explanation. Writing systems controlled by administrators could be deliberately discontinued. Records would stop because those who kept them moved on or chose silence. This theory is disturbing because it reframes disappearance as obedience. The people may not have understood why they were leaving, only that authority demanded it. History would then remember nothing because history is written by those who stay behind. When leaders and scribes leave together, memory goes with them. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of this chapter is not evidence of collapse, but lack of resistance. There are no signs of revolt, no defensive measures against leadership, no symbols of dissent. The population appears to have followed quietly. In moments of internal collapse, rebellion usually leaves traces: graffiti, destroyed symbols of power, makeshift weapons. None appear here. Authority did not fall violently, it faded. This silence suggests compliance on a massive scale. Either people trusted their leaders completely, or resistance felt pointless. Both possibilities are unsettling. They imply a social order so strong that even its dissolution occurred without protest. The rulers themselves leave no farewell, no warnings etched in stone, no explanations for future generations. Their silence is absolute, and that silence shapes the mystery more than any artifact. What remains is an image of a civilization that did not scream when it ended. It did not fight, riot, or burn. It obeyed, and then it vanished. And that quiet obedience may be the most disturbing clue of all, because it suggests the end was not chaos, but consensus, a shared step into the unknown from which no one returned. The idea of invasion lingers because it feels familiar. History is full of conquerors who erased cities, enslaved populations, and rewrote borders. It is tempting to assume the same happened here, that an outside force arrived, overwhelmed defenses, and absorbed or removed the population. Yet the evidence refuses to cooperate. An invasion usually announces itself. Weapons appear in strange contexts. Defensive walls show damage. Mass graves form where resistance failed. Victors leave behind records, monuments, or at least cultural fingerprints. Here, none of that exists. There are no foreign weapons scattered in streets, no trauma etched into skeletons, no burned layers marking conquest. This absence forces historians into an uncomfortable position. Either there was no invasion, or the invaders erased evidence with extraordinary precision. The latter is difficult to accept, yet not entirely impossible. A conqueror could dismantle defenses, repurpose cities, and suppress records. But even the most ruthless empires rarely succeed in total erasure. What complicates matters further is silence from neighboring cultures. There are no accounts celebrating victory or expansion, no myths recounting triumph over a vanished people. It is as if no one noticed or no one claimed responsibility. Historians struggle with this theory because it requires accepting something unprecedented. A conquest so complete that even memory was destroyed. It feels excessive, almost theatrical, yet the mystery leaves room for little else. Invasion without evidence remains unlikely, but it cannot be fully dismissed, hovering uneasily between rejection and possibility. A quieter theory shifts focus away from violence and toward assimilation. Perhaps the people did not die at all. Perhaps they simply ceased to exist as a distinct culture. Over time, populations can blend, adopting new languages, customs, and identities until their origins disappear. There are subtle hints supporting this idea. Certain cultural practices appear elsewhere shortly after the abandonment. Architectural motifs, tools, or artistic symbols emerge in neighboring regions, stripped of their original context. These echoes suggest movement rather than annihilation. If absorption occurred, it would explain the lack of destruction. People may have left voluntarily, joining other societies for safety, opportunity, or survival. In doing so, they would carry skills and traditions, but slowly lose the name that once defined them. This process is difficult to trace archaeologically. Assimilation leaves faint trails, blurred by time and adaptation. It rarely produces dramatic endings. Instead, identity erodes quietly, generation by generation. Yet this theory also raises questions. Cultural absorption usually happens gradually, unevenly. Here, disappearance feels sudden. Entire cities emptied, not thinned. Identity vanished all at once, not over centuries. Still, the idea remains compelling because it replaces catastrophe with transformation. The civilization may not have fallen at all. It may have dissolved into the wider human story. Invisible because history prefers clear endings over quiet continuity. If absorption is the answer, then the greatest loss was not life, but memory. Civilizations survive as long as their names are spoken, their stories retold. Once those vanish, even survival becomes a kind of death. History rarely remembers those who fade quietly. There are no monuments for cultures that dissolve, no anniversaries marking their end. They become footnotes, then mysteries, then silence. In this scenario, the civilization did not collapse or flee disaster. It transitioned, leaving behind cities. Because identity no longer required them. Over time, descendants would remember ancestors vaguely, then not at all. This is perhaps the most unsettling possibility. Not extinction, but erasure. A people who lived on, but without a name, without recognition, without a place in recorded history. If true, the ruins we study are not tombs, but abandoned shells. The civilization ended not with violence or fear, but with forgetting. And history, which depends on names and narratives, let them go without protest. In the end, this theory offers no villain, no catastrophe, no dramatic conclusion, only the quiet truth that survival does not guarantee remembrance. And for historians, that may be the hardest ending to accept. When conventional explanations fail, attention drifts toward possibilities that sit uncomfortably at the edges of academic discussion. Sudden catastrophes are often mentioned briefly, then quietly dismissed. Massive floods, abrupt seismic shifts, or even cosmic events like meteor impacts are labeled unlikely, not because they are impossible, but because proving them centuries or millennia later is extraordinarily difficult. Geological records do show that Earth is capable of sudden violence. Rivers can change course overnight. Earthquakes can redraw landscapes in minutes. Massive floods can erase entire regions with little warning. In rare cases, celestial events have altered climate or geography almost instantly. These are not fantasies, they are documented realities. The problem is correlation. In this mystery, the timeline feels compatible with a sudden event. The abandonment is too fast, too synchronized, to align comfortably with slow-moving forces. A catastrophe could explain urgency without warfare, fear without resistance, and silence without recovery. If an event struck quickly enough, it might have left little behind for archaeologists to interpret. Yet the physical evidence remains elusive. There is no unmistakable debris layer, no crater, no clear fault rupture tied directly to the moment of disappearance. Critics argue that without such markers, catastrophe remains speculation. But supporters counter that not all disasters leave obvious scars, especially if later natural processes obscure them. What unsettles historians is not the lack of proof, but the fit. Catastrophic scenarios explain coordination, speed, and finality in ways other theories struggle to match. The reluctance to pursue them fully reflects discomfort more than impossibility. History prefers causes that unfold slowly, not ones that rewrite reality overnight. But the silence left behind suggests something sudden, something overwhelming, something that ended normal life before explanation could follow. Another forbidden line of thought shifts focus from what happened to what was known. Some researchers speculate that this civilization may have understood something dangerous about its environment or the world itself. Knowledge in this view was not power, but warning. Ancient societies were often deeply attuned to natural cycles. They tracked stars, monitored seasons, and understood landscapes intimately. If they detected an impending catastrophe, whether environmental, geological, or astronomical, evacuation might have seemed the only rational response. This theory reframes abandonment as foresight rather than panic. Instead of reacting to disaster, the civilization may have acted to avoid it. Such a decision would require coordination, trust in leadership, and acceptance of loss for the sake of survival. The idea is controversial because it challenges assumptions about ancient capabilities. Yet evidence suggests they were more perceptive than often credited. Precise calendars, architectural alignments, and environmental management indicate advanced observational knowledge. If they recognized a threat others could not, silence becomes understandable. Warning future generations might have been impossible or meaningless if the danger was location specific or time bound. Leaving quietly may have been seen as the only option. This possibility is unsettling because it implies wisdom rather than weakness. The civilization did not fail, it chose to disappear rather than be destroyed. But without records explaining that choice, their knowledge vanished with them, leaving only speculation and abandoned cities behind. Despite their explanatory power, these theories remain on the fringe. Academia thrives on evidence that can be tested, measured, and repeated. Sudden catastrophes and advanced knowledge are difficult to prove and easy to sensationalize. Scholars fear crossing the line between rigorous inquiry and speculation. There is also institutional caution. Careers are built on credibility, and controversial ideas carry risk. Without definitive proof, pursuing forbidden theories can invite criticism or dismissal. As a result, safer explanations dominate discussion even when they feel incomplete. Another barrier is absence itself. The lack of records makes these ideas difficult to anchor. Without written testimony, researchers rely on inference, which history treats with suspicion. Yet inference is often all that remains when silence is the primary artifact. Still, unanswered questions persist. Why the speed? Why the coordination? Why the finality? Each forbidden theory attempts to address what conventional ones cannot. Dismissing them entirely may be as unscientific as embracing them without restraint. In the end, these ideas linger because the mystery demands them. When evidence refuses to align, imagination fills the gap, not out of fantasy, but necessity. History may resist uncomfortable questions, but the ruins remain, silent and patient, waiting for explanations bold enough to confront what might have been lost along with the civilization itself. What we know about this civilization is shaped as much by absence as by discovery. Only a fraction of its settlements have been fully excavated, and even fewer have been studied in detail. Vast areas remain buried beneath soil, modern cities, farmland, or shifting landscapes. In many cases, archaeologists know sites exist, but lack the funding, time, or permission to explore them. This incomplete picture matters deeply. History is being reconstructed from fragments, not from the whole. A single unexcavated city could contain evidence that transforms speculation into clarity. Administrative centers, burial grounds, or final occupation layers may still lie untouched, preserving answers sealed away for centuries. Excavation itself is slow and selective. Researchers must choose where to dig, and those choices shape interpretation. When only elite centers or well-preserved sites are studied, everyday realities remain hidden. The story that emerges may be distorted by what is easiest to reach, not what is most revealing. There is also the possibility that the most important clues lie in places never meant to be found. Easily, peripheral settlements, temporary camps, or migration routes may hold evidence of movement, decision-making, or transition. Without them, theories remain incomplete. What unsettles historians is how much remains invisible. Entire chapters of the civilization's final days may still be underground, waiting for discovery. Until those spaces are explored, every conclusion remains provisional. The disappearance feels unresolved, not because answers do not exist, but because they may still be buried, silent beneath layers of earth and time, reshaping the mystery whenever uncovered. Most histories move toward a conclusion. Empires rise, fracture, and fall. There is a final battle, a last ruler, a definitive moment historians can point to and say, this is where it ended. That expectation is so deeply ingrained that when it fails, it feels like a mistake rather than a mystery. But this civilization offers no ending at all. There is no final chapter carved into stone, no dramatic collapse recorded in chronicles. The narrative simply stops mid-sentence, leaving behind a blank space where closure should exist. Archaeological layers do not mark an end, only an absence. Cities stand unfinished, systems remain intact, and then nothing follows. This is deeply unsettling because it challenges how history itself functions. Without an ending, there is no lesson neatly packaged, no moral resolution. The past becomes unstable, open, unfinished. Historians are left describing what came before, while the end refuses to be pinned down. The lack of conclusion forces us to accept uncertainty. It suggests that not all human stories resolve themselves within the frameworks we expect. Some simply vanish from view, not because they lacked meaning, but because meaning itself slipped beyond our ability to record it. In this way, the civilization becomes a ghost in the historical record, not destroyed, not defeated, but incomplete. And that incompleteness lingers because history does not like blank pages. Yet this story insists on one, daring us to accept that some endings were never meant to be known. As unsettling as this mystery is, it does not exist only in the past. It reflects back at the present, asking uncomfortable questions about our own assumptions. We often believe collapse announces itself loudly, that warning signs will be obvious, that failure will give us time to respond. This civilization suggests otherwise. It shows that societies can vanish without spectacle, without visible breakdown, without violence or noise. Systems can function, cities can thrive, and yet an ending can still arrive quietly. That realization challenges modern confidence. We rely on data, forecasts, and indicators to tell us when something is wrong. But what if the most dangerous moments are the ones that look stable? What if disappearance begins not with chaos, but with calm decisions made out of sight? The mystery also raises questions about memory. We assume that what matters will be recorded, preserved, remembered. Yet here is a civilization that built extensively, organized meticulously, and still slipped from collective memory. Survival alone did not guarantee remembrance. In that sense, the disappearance warns us about fragility, not of structures, but of narrative. History is not just what happens, it is what gets carried forward, and this civilization reminds us that entire worlds can be lost not through destruction, but through forgetting. In the end, one question remains, stubborn and unresolved. Did they flee from something terrible, escaping a disaster history never saw? Or did they walk willingly into an unknown future, choosing departure over preservation? Both possibilities are unsettling. Escape implies a threat so severe it erased return. Choice implies a decision so profound it outweighed identity, place, and memory. Either way, the result is the same: silence. No new evidence has yet closed this question. Each discovery adds context, not certainty. The mystery remains open, suspended between explanation and speculation. Perhaps that is where it must remain. Some histories do not resolve themselves because resolution was never left behind. The civilization did not leave an answer, it left a question. And until the ground yields something new, that question endures, echoing across empty streets and abandoned cities, reminding us that the past is not always finished speaking, even when it has fallen completely silent. In recent years, technology has begun to peer where shovels cannot. Satellite imagery reveals outlines of forgotten cities beneath modern terrain. Ground-penetrating radar detects structures hidden far below the surface. AI-assisted analysis compares patterns across regions, identifying connections humans might miss. These tools have transformed archaeology, but they have not simplified this mystery. Instead, they have complicated it. New settlements appear where none were expected. Road networks suggest coordination across vast distances. Patterns of abandonment align too closely to ignore. Technology shows that disappearance was not isolated. It was widespread, synchronized, and deliberate, But knowing that raises new questions rather than answers. Why did so many places empty at once? What information moved faster than people themselves? Remote sensing also reveals anomalies. Some cities show signs of partial return, brief reoccupation, or halted reuse. Others remain untouched entirely. These inconsistencies challenge neat explanations and hint at regional differences we do not yet understand. AI models can map population shifts, but they cannot explain motive. They show movement, not meaning. The data confirms that something extraordinary happened, but it does not tell us why. The promise of technology lies in its ability to uncover what was invisible before. Yet each discovery adds layers of complexity. The more clearly we see the past, the less certain our conclusions become. Instead of solving the mystery, new tools ensure it remains alive, expanding with every scan and data set analyzed. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this mystery is that evidence rarely contradicts itself directly. Instead, it refuses to align neatly. Each discovery supports part of a theory while undermining another. Climate evidence suggests stress, but not collapse. Infrastructure suggests stability, not decline. Abandonment suggests urgency, but not panic. Archaeologists often expect convergence, a moment when data points finally agree. Here, convergence never arrives. The puzzle remains asymmetrical, pieces fitting in some places and resisting in others. Every answer opens new gaps. This persistent misalignment keeps the disappearance unresolved. It prevents closure. The story cannot be simplified without ignoring critical evidence, and no single explanation satisfies every clue. In that sense, the mystery endures not because of ignorance, but because of complexity. The civilization left behind enough evidence to provoke questions, but not enough to resolve them. The ground continues to yield fragments, and each fragment reshapes the story without completing it until evidence aligns. History remains suspended, caught between knowledge and uncertainty, and perhaps that is the final clue. The disappearance was not meant to be easily understood, only remembered as something that defied the patterns history relies on to make sense of the past.